greatest what could have been stories in basketball history, we tend to focus on guys like Derrick Rose, Brandon Roy, and Greg Oden. Guys who showed high-level talent in the league and for whatever reason simply did not get the chance to fulfill their full potential. The players who get spoken about much less are the ones who we never see take a step onto an NBA court, the players whose careers end before they even get started. But to me, that's what makes the mysterious story of Lenny Cook that much more interesting. Because here we have a player who at one point in his career was seen unanimously as a future star, but somehow he never even played a single minute in the NBA. How is that possible? Well, as an 8th grader, Lenny Cook was already 6'4" and had all the makings of a future NBA player. He had the size, the strength, the speed, and the raw skills that had anyone watching him just drop their jaws in awe. But what's crazy is that, and I really want you to keep this in mind, Lenny Cook did not begin playing organized basketball until the age of 15. So as we go forward and as we dive into why he was seen as such an elite prospect, just remember how much room Lenny had to grow, because every game to him was really a learning experience. With that in mind, immediately when Lenny did take the court as an AAU basketball player, he was simply unstoppable. Already at this point in time, Lenny was a man playing amongst boys, and the proof of this goes beyond the court. We actually have the words of future first-team All-NBA Joakim Noah to back Lenny Cook's hype up. Because during this time, Joakim Noah was just 5'11", but was a teammate on Lenny's AAU team, and he remembers, quote, "I was a 13-year-old French kid from Paris, and all of a sudden, I met Lenny and was watching him play in all of these tournaments. He was really my hero because the way he could dominate a game was unbelievable to me." It was really the summer of 2000, though, that cemented Cook's greatness. As playing in the famous ABCD camp against the nation's top recruits, Lenny shined and was named the camp's underclassman MVP, an award LeBron James would win the following year. It was this string of games that led to Lenny being named by several scouting services as the #1 recruit in America, and because of this, Carmelo Anthony would later say this, quote, "He was coming from being the #1 player in the country, and we all looked at Lenny like that. It was his size, how strong he was, how he could pass the ball and play the point, kind of like magic, I guess. He was really explosive." Huge words, and the thing is, Lenny was not just standing out among his peers. When matched up against professional NBA level competition, as a high schooler, Lenny still stood out as well, because one of the biggest indicators of Lenny Cook's true potential came in the form of his performance at Rucker Park headed into his junior year. That summer, Rucker Park was home to an elite offseason basketball league that included NBA stars such as Ray Allen, Zach Randolph, and Stephon Marbury. The league also had several other NBA players on its rosters, and when matching up against NBA level talent, Lenny Cook not only held his own, but he dominated. He would finish with averages of 23 points and 13 rebounds per game, and he was second in the entire league in scoring. It was because of these performances at Rucker Park that people walked away not only saying that Lenny Cook was the #1 recruit in America, they walked away saying that Lenny Cook could play in the NBA right then and there. That is how impressive he was. At this point in time, it seemed like all of the stars were aligned for a very long career for Lenny. In fact, I'm gonna say it seemed like the man was headed to the Hall of Fame, or at least was going to be a multi-time All-Star. He was that good, he was that unstoppable. But as we all know, Lenny never even made the NBA, so how did that happen? How did he fail? Well, to me, there are 4 major reasons that led to the downfall of Lenny Cook. The first, the very beginning of his downfall, could be found at the ABCD camp in 2001, the year after Lenny had taken home MVP. Because during this camp, Lenny would match up against a soon-to-be junior in high school, LeBron James, and LeBron would obliterate him. LeBron would finish with 24 points to Lenny's 9, and to add insult to injury, LeBron hit a game-winning jumper with just about 6 seconds left in Lenny Cook's face. After the game, Lenny would say to his friend, "How'd he make that? Oh my god." This game was very important, as many have pointed to it as not only the moment that LeBron launched himself into the national spotlight, it, but also the moment where Lenny Cook's career began to turn downward. In fact, the legendary Sonny Vaccaro, head of the ABCD camp, would call LeBron's game-winning shot the one physical moment that symbolized the beginning of LeBron and the downfall of Lenny Cook. Sonny would also go on to say he beat Lenny on his own turf. I mean, you could say it was one shot, one game, but in a way, Lenny never recovered. And that was certainly true, but of course, it wasn't the full story. Because the second reason for Lenny's downfall came in the form of his work ethic on and off the court. Now, on the court, Lenny was seen as lazy. He was seen as somewhat of a problem, which we will get into in a second, because for now, let's talk about his schoolwork. As a freshman in high school, he got all Fs. As a sophomore, he skipped 57 days of school. He was, by all accounts, not only way behind, but on a track to complete failure. However, that's when Cook was offered to move into his AAU teammate's house, where he was now in the care of Debbie Bortner. This was a situation now that many people have compared to The Blind Side. Debbie tried her best to look out for Lenny. Immediately, she got Lenny tested for learning disabilities, and it was discovered that Cook did have a learning disability when it came to the language area of his brain. However, it was also discovered that, according to Debbie, quote, he tested in the genius level in matrix reasoning, which is puzzle solving. He can, take things apart and look at them and put them back together. The psychologist who was testing him said she feels that's really part of the reason why he's so gifted in basketball. He can see the whole floor, put it all together in his mind, and know where everybody's supposed to be. Under Debbie's care, Lenny's life did take a huge turnaround. However, the problem was that after a few years with Debbie, Lenny would leave and move in with a trainer in Flint, Michigan in order to prepare for the draft. This would prove to be a huge mistake and leads us to the third reason for Cook's downfall: the people he surrounded himself with. Lenny himself would say, "I had an opportunity to be an NBA superstar one day, but I was around people who told me I should go pro out of high school. They told me I was going to be a lottery pick. I shouldn't have listened to them." Meanwhile, Queens basketball consultant Rob Johnson would say, "Lenny Cook has all the talent in the world, but his head wasn't screwed on right, and NBA people knew that." And his mom would even say, he was a teenage kid and every day he had money in his pocket. And I don't mean $200 or $300. It was whatever he wanted, like the world was his, so he took advantage of it. Basically, what this meant was that Lenny had too many yes men around him enabling him, and this could be seen during the Round Ball Classic of that year. As Sonny Vaccaro remembers telling Lenny, "Every NBA scout is here and they're watching you. I said, if you're going to do something stupid, don't do it this week or do it in your room." And what happens? It's 1 o'clock in the morning, people are hanging around in the lobby of the Hyatt, and here comes Lenny with his entourage, all the partiers, all the jewelry. I said, "What the hell are you doing? We talked about this." This to me is a very telling story, and circling back, Lenny's previous failures in the classroom would come back to haunt him, because Lenny was actually held back for 2 years, which meant that he was 20 by the time he entered the 2002 NBA draft, which also meant he only played in 8 organized basketball games in the 2 years headed to the draft. This was part of the reason that scouts were afraid to draft him, as they had simply not seen him play in a long time. On top of this, Lenny would not attend NBA pre-draft workouts. Reports are conflicting here. Some say that Lenny just did not want to go. Lenny himself said that he had a toe injury, which meant he couldn't play. Regardless of who you believe, Lenny did not work out for NBA teams, and this seriously hurt him. At the time, he would say, "All I need is 1 foot in the door. I'll take care of the rest. That's all that matters to me." Unfortunately, though, he would never receive that chance, because Lenny Cook would go undrafted in the 2002 draft, and the reason for this was not just lack of recent gameplay, it was also the perception that surrounded him. As Sonny Vaccaro would say, there already was a mystery about him when he left Debbie, people starting to wonder about his character. That's not to say he was a bad guy, because he wasn't. Just one of those kids who listens to the last person who tells him something. And there were people all around him, agents, runners, glorifying him, giving him things. He took everything. Sonny would continue with, "You can't put him in the group of New York guys that were overhyped. What it came down to was a complete mistrust in who and what he was. Teams others were afraid. Lenny was on the pedestal because he was one of those elite guys. He was a damn good. I just think he blew it all. But still, even with all of this, Lenny did have a chance to redeem himself, and that is when the real tragedy and final reason for his downfall would occur. Because after going undrafted, reality hit Lenny hard, and he would actually say, "I got a little big-headed. In high school, I didn't take the game seriously. I listened to the hype, I believed the rankings. Now I know I have to work at my game, I take it a lot more seriously." And he would certainly try to bounce back, but unfortunately things did not work out that way, as after a few summer league stints and seasons with lesser professional teams, Lenny would be seriously injured in a car accident in 2004. This accident put Lenny into a coma, and when he woke up, he would then spend months in a wheelchair and was never athletically the same. His chances of reaching the NBA were gone, and with this, we really had the final piece of his downfall. Nowadays though, Lenny does give speeches to kids warning them to stay clear of the streets and to focus on the mission at hand. He also is a basketball coach and mentors his players with real life experience of what it's like to have it all and then lose it. As Lenny has said, "My message today and every day is academics should come first. At the end of the day, when you talk about a student athlete, the student comes first." And personally, I think that's amazing. The fact that Lenny is not bitter and instead uses his story to help kids is amazing. With all that said though, we have reached the end of today's video, guys. Remember, please leave a like, it helps me